Imagine an organization at the absolute peak of its game.
Right, like a billion-dollar startup or something.
Exactly. A startup where they have, the most brilliant minds collaborating seamlessly, massive profits, unprecedented growth, and a company culture so perfect they have, like, kombucha on tap in the break room.
Yeah, the absolute ideal.
Right. But then, seemingly overnight, the entire thing just implodes.
Huh.
The founders are ousted in this vicious, ego-driven boardroom coup, and the company fractures into warring factions.
It's a total
A
disaster.
complete disaster. And that exact scenario, a utopian community suddenly tearing itself apart from the inside. That happened roughly 2,000 years ago in a city called Corinth.
Yes, it did.
So today, we are taking you inside an ancient crisis management playbook designed to stop that exact mutiny. It is a document known as the First Epistle of Clement to the Corinthians. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Right, and to set the proper context for you, what we are examining is a letter sent from the early church in Rome to the church in Corinth.
Yeah.
But before we plunge into the mechanics of this text, we should establish the parameters of our deep dive today.
For sure.
This document is fundamentally important to early Christian history and theology. However, our objective here isn't to debate its religious truth or endorse its specific spiritual worldview.
Right, we're taking a step back.
Exactly. We are approaching this text impartially to explore the intricate arguments the author constructs, the fascinating historical context he leans on, and, well, the brilliant psychological insights this letter offers into human nature, ambition, and organizational conflict.
And the author starts by deliberately painting a stark contrast between Corinth's past and its chaotic present.
He really sets the stage.
He does. He builds a picture of a before state that sounds almost impossibly perfect. I mean, Corinth was renowned for its steadfast faith. They had this magnificent hospitality that people traveled just to experience.
Yeah, they possess perfect and sound knowledge.
Right. The societal structure was completely harmonious. They respected older men, the young people entertained modest thoughts, and the women blamelessly managed their households.
It sounds utopian.
It really does. They were totally free from arrogance, yielding to authority, and were more glad to give than to receive.
The text actually describes them as having a profound and rich peace and an insatiable desire of doing good.
Wow.
Yeah, they actually mourned over their neighbors' transgressions as if they were their own. It is the portrait of a community operating in absolute frictionless unity. But the author details this golden age specifically to highlight the tragic mechanism of their downfall. He quotes an older proverb to explain the shift. He says, "My beloved ate and drank and was enlarged and waxed fat and kicked."
Waxed fat and kicked. I love that phrase.
Out of nowhere, this detestable and unholy sedition is kindled by just a few headstrong, self-willed people who managed to completely oust the honorable presbyters.
Which were the administrative and spiritual leaders of the community.
Exactly.
So they basically got too comfortable. It's kind of like a championship sports team, you know? When a team is building themselves up from the bottom, everybody passes the ball.
Because they have to.
Exactly. Everybody plays defense because they are desperate to win. But the moment they actually win the championship and secure the trophy, the teamwork starts to dissolve.
Right.
Suddenly, the players aren't worried about surviving. They're worried about who gets the MVP award, who gets the biggest shoe contract, who gets their face on the poster.
Yeah, the ego takes over.
The abundance of success actually dismantles the collaborative framework that created it in the first place.
That's a perfect analogy. The author is diagnosing a highly sophisticated paradox here. Success breeds the very conditions for its own destruction. When a community is no longer struggling to survive external threats, the internal energy has to go somewhere. The waxing fat leads to a dangerous complacency.
And then things fall apart.
Right. And in that vacuum of external pressure, the most destructive of all human emotions takes root. The author doesn't blame bad administrative policy or, a disagreement over the community budget for this coup.
No, he places the blame entirely on jealousy.
Jealousy, exactly.
And he doesn't just mention jealousy in passing either. The letter provides a massive, incredibly detailed historical ledger of jealousy's body count.
It really is a relentless roll call of tragedy.
It's wild.
It begins in deep antiquity, detailing Cain murdering Abel, Jacob being forced to flee into the wilderness from his brother Esau, and Joseph being thrown into a pit and sold into bondage by his own flesh and blood.
It's brutal.
It continues with Moses fleeing from Pharaoh and King David being relentlessly persecuted by King Saul.
But wait, look at that list of names. There is a deeply specific pattern there.
Oh, absolutely.
He isn't listing rival nations going to war over territory. He's listing brothers, mentors, and mentees.
The closest relationship.
Right. Jealousy doesn't strike between strangers on the street. The insight here is that this emotion specifically targets and destroys the tightest bonds of intimacy.
That's a great point. And he takes that antisocial mechanism a step further, bringing it right up to their contemporary era. He cites the greatest and most righteous pillars of the early church.
Like Peter and Paul.
Yes. He points to Peter, who endured immense labors and died because of, quote, unrighteous jealousy, and Paul, who was jailed 7 times, driven into exile, and ultimately stoned for the exact same reason.
Wow.
He even invokes mythological figures, mentioning women who suffered cruel and unholy insults as Danaids and Dirce.
And just for context for you listening, those are figures from ancient mythology who were famously thrown to wild beasts or tortured in horrifying ways.
Right.
The author is using them to show that jealousy's collateral damage spares absolutely no one, not even innocent bystanders. But I have to push back on the author's core premise for a second.
Okay.
The text goes on to claim that jealousy has overthrown great cities and completely uprooted massive nations. Isn't it a bit reductive to look at every fallen empire, every boardroom coup, and every war in human history and blame it entirely on people just being envious?
Well, it sounds reductive if we define jealousy the way modern society does.
Like just wanting someone's new chariot.
Exactly, as a petty emotion. But we have to understand the philosophical framework the author is operating within here.
Okay.
In this text's worldview, jealousy is not a fleeting feeling. It is a fundamental, chaotic force that fractures the baseline unity of humanity.
It's much deeper.
Right. The text argues that it estranges wives from husbands, literally breaking the ancient declaration of bone of my bones. Jealousy is the ultimate anti-creation mechanism. It divides what the universe intended to be whole.
Okay, so if human history is just an endless, depressing bloodbath of jealousy tearing relationships apart, where do you look to find a working model of peace?
Because you certainly can't point to humanity, and the author realizes this. So to counter this destructive human force, he executes a massive rhetorical pivot.
He looks up.
Yes, he argues that we have to look away from the chaos of human history and look up at the mechanics of the cosmos. To prove that peace requires absolute submission and order, the letter shifts to the perfect, unquestioning harmony of nature.
And the poetry he uses for this section is remarkably vivid.
It's beautiful.
The text talks about the dancing stars circling in harmony within their assigned bounds, never swerving aside. It describes the earth bearing fruit at its proper seasons without any dissension.
Even the unutterable statutes of the nether regions are constrained by these strict ordinances.
I particularly love the part about the ocean. It describes the basin of the boundless sea, being constrained by physical barriers, commanded by its creator, so far shalt thou come, and thy waves shall be broken.
It is a profoundly stoic, almost scientific view of the cosmos for that time period. Everything possesses a designated place and an uncrossable boundary. The impenetrable ocean, the shifting of the seasons, the winds in their several quarters, they all obey their assigned limits without initiating a mutiny against the natural order.
It reads like you were staring into the exposed gears of a finely tuned giant clock.
Oh, that's a good way to picture it.
The minute hand isn't jealous of the hour hand. The spring doesn't try to take over the pendulum's job just because the pendulum gets more attention. Every single piece just does exactly what it was designed to do.
Right, and that is the only reason the clock can actually tell time.
Exactly.
The philosophical argument being made to the rebels in Corinth is one of scale and absurdity. If the immense, terrifying forces of nature, the boundless sea, and the dancing stars can subordinate themselves to a grand design without stepping out of their assigned lanes, how incredibly foolish is it for a few headstrong Corinthians to think they are exempt from the laws of subordination?
Like, who do you think you are?
Exactly. The universe functions on strict hierarchy and natural boundaries. Chaos is not just disruptive to the community, it is quite literally unnatural.
But, you know, a clock doesn't care if its gears wear down and die. Human beings do.
That's true.
Cosmic metaphors about staying in your lane are beautiful, but if you are asking a group of ambitious rebels to give up their newfound power, you need to offer them a much bigger incentive.
You have to prove that there is a reward for subordination.
Right. And to prove that the natural order includes cycles of renewal and ultimate resurrection, the author transitions to what might be the strangest piece of evidence in the entire letter.
He introduces the bird.
He introduces the bird. Here's where it gets really interesting.
It's so unexpected.
The author just drops the legend of the phoenix right into the middle of this high-stakes crisis management document, and he describes its biology with the straight-faced precision of a nature documentary.
He really does. He states that there is a unique bird in the regions of Arabia called the phoenix, and it lives for exactly 500 years.
Yep.
When its biological clock is running out and it is about to die, it builds itself a coffin out of frankincense, myrrh, and other spices.
It climbs inside and it perishes.
But as the flesh of the dead creature rots, the moisture generates a worm.
This worm then feeds on the dead body, grows wings, becomes a new phoenix, and then this is the crazy part. It physically picks up the coffin containing its parents' bones.
Right.
It flies all the way from Arabia to Egypt, specifically to the City of the Sun. It places the coffin on the altar in broad daylight in sight of the entire population.
And then the local Egyptian priests check the historical registers of the times to confirm that exactly 500 years have passed.
It's so detailed.
The level of specific logistical detail is what stands out. The author is treating this like an audited historical event.
But wait, how does an ancient Roman read a letter citing a magical regenerating firebird and not immediately laugh the author out of the room?
Well,
I mean, how could this possibly be a persuasive argument to a group of cynical mutineers?
to understand the persuasion, we have to inhabit the mindset of the first-century Mediterranean world. To the author, and to the educated Roman audience receiving this letter, the phoenix was not a fairy tale.
Wait, really?
Really, it was widely accepted as a marvel of the natural world.
Yeah.
It had been documented by highly respected Roman historians like Pliny the Elder.
Oh, wow.
To them, the phoenix was as scientifically real as the transition from day to night, or seeds rotting in the earth to bring forth crops, both of which the author also cites in the exact same paragraph.
So he thinks he is citing peer-reviewed biology.
He absolutely does. He is using it as tangible, biological proof of the resurrection. His logical equation is straightforward. If the Creator can raise a literal bird from the dead out of rotting flesh and myrrh, he will absolutely keep his promises to resurrect the humans who serve him in holiness.
Okay, that makes sense.
It shrinks the petty squabbles happening in Corinth down to nothing. If eternal resurrection is a guaranteed fact of the universe proven by the phoenix, why are you risking your eternal standing to fight for temporary administrative power over a local community group?
That's a huge perspective shift. But cosmic metaphors and promises of eternal resurrection are fantastic for managing the afterlife. To stop a mutiny today in the real world, you need a structural framework to survive the interim.
You need HR rules.
Exactly. You have to bring the hammer down on the specific administrative issue. You cannot just fire your leaders because you feel like it.
Right. And so the letter pivots from the vastness of the cosmos down to the highly practical rules of governance. The author lays out a rigid, documented chain of command. God sent Christ. Christ appointed the apostles.
Makes sense.
And the apostles went out preaching and appointed their first converts to be the administrative and spiritual leaders of the new communities. Crucially, the apostles didn't just leave it there. They explicitly anticipated power vacuums.
They planned ahead.
They instituted a succession plan, commanding that when those approved men died, others specifically approved men should seamlessly take over their ministry.
And to back up why this strict chain of custody is necessary, the text pulls out a fascinating anecdote about Moses from the Old Testament.
Oh, this is a great part.
The premise is that Moses foresaw that there would be jealousy. There's that antisocial mechanism again over who got to control the priesthood. He knew that if he just picked his favorite guy, it would tear the tribes apart.
Right. He had to remove human ambition from the selection process entirely.
So Moses takes 12 wooden rods, and he has the chief of each tribe carve their name into one of them. He takes all 12 rods, seals them inside the sacred tabernacle, locks the doors, seals the keys, and announces to the people, the tribe whose rod buds is the one God has chosen.
The anticipation must have been crazy.
The next morning, he opens the doors in front of 600,000 witnesses. And the rod belonging to Aaron isn't just budding, it has sprouted and borne actual fruit.
The disorder stops instantly.
It is the ultimate unhackable HR performance review. Moses literally used a miraculous visual aid to settle a union strike.
He really did. And the author connects the Moses anecdote directly to the current crisis. Just as Moses knew there would be jealousy over leadership, the apostles knew perfectly well there would be strife over the name of the bishop's office.
I saw it coming.
They anticipated this exact power struggle. Therefore, when these Corinthian rebels thrust out honorable, blameless leaders who were fulfilling their duties perfectly, it wasn't just an internal policy dispute. They weren't just restructuring a stagnant board of directors.
They were severing a divine historical chain of custody.
Exactly.
But this brings us to the hardest part of any crisis management. You have laid out the rules, you have pointed to the harmonious cosmos, you have terrified them with the eternal stakes of the phoenix, and you have shown them the historical chain of command.
Right.
How do you actually get a group of arrogant, power-hungry rebels to step down voluntarily? Because, honestly, pointing out a rule book usually just makes rebels dig their heels in deeper.
It does. The author recognizes the limits of systemic arguments. Rules don't change hearts. So he introduces the final, ultimate antidote to ambition: self-sacrificing love.
Love.
Yes, the text dedicates an extensive, incredibly beautiful section to praising love, stating, "Love covereth a multitude of sins. Love maketh no seditions. Love doeth all things unconquered." But, and this is key, it quickly leaves the abstract poetry behind and becomes uncomfortably practical.
Very practical. He speaks directly to the mutineers, essentially looking them right in the eye, and asks, "Who therefore is noble among you? Who is compassionate?"
You would put them on the spot.
He challenges the rebels to stand up in front of the congregation and say, "If by reason of me there be faction and strife and divisions, I retire, I depart, whither ye will. Only let the flock of Christ be at peace."
He literally demands that they fall on their swords for the good of the community.
Wow.
And he provides massive historical precedents for this level of sacrifice.
Yeah.
He mentions Moses again, who, when the people committed idolatry, told God to either forgive them or blot me also out of the book of the living.
He offered himself.
Exactly. He highlights Gentile kings who, during times of plague or famine, voluntarily delivered themselves to death to appease the gods and save their citizens.
He even brings up women like Judith and Esther who exposed themselves to terrifying, extreme peril to save their beleaguered people. What the author is doing here is an absolute masterclass in psychological judo.
Psychological judo, I like that.
Well, he knows these mutineers are driven by ego. They started this coup because they want to be seen as the greatest, the most powerful, the most important men in Corinth.
Right.
So the author redefines legacy for them. He makes it so that the only way for them to go down in history as great is to surrender. He dares them to prove their ultimate nobility not by ruling the community, but by walking away from it.
He completely flips the power dynamic. In the moral economy of this letter, true strength is found exclusively in humility. The author warns them to accept chastisement, reminding them of the ancient wisdom that God scourgeth every son whom he receiveth.
It's a hard truth.
It is. The ultimate message is that harmony is handed down through obedience and self-effacement, never through ambition and power grabs.
Well, we have covered incredible ground today. We started by examining the destructive, intimate power of human jealousy, an anti-creation force so strong it can turn a utopian community into a war zone.
We really went everywhere.
We did. From there, we zoomed out to observe the harmonious, unbreakable laws of the Stoic cosmos, where everything respects its boundaries. We explored the bizarre life cycle of the phoenix as first-century scientific proof of ultimate renewal.
Magical Firebird.
Right. Then we unpacked the unhackable HR rules designed to prevent power vacuums. And finally, we witnessed a brilliant piece of psychological judo demanding humility and self-sacrificing love.
And, the tension between personal ambition and collective harmony is an ancient universal struggle that hasn't changed in 2 millennia.
So true. Whether you are navigating a massive corporate hierarchy, trying to lead a local community group, or just wrestling with your own ego, the lessons of Corinth are highly applicable. Sometimes the most powerful, noble leadership move you can make is recognizing when your own ambition is the problem and knowing when to step aside for the health of the whole.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up, there is one final provocative detail buried at the very end of this massive text.
Oh, what is it?
The author mentions sending 3 specific messengers men, named Claudius Ephebus, Valerius Bito, and Fortunatus. They are dispatched to physically carry the scroll across the sea and act as official witnesses between Rome and Corinth.
Okay.
Their strict instructions are to report back speedily on whether peace and concord have been restored.
Yeah.
Imagine being one of those 3 men. You are walking into a fiercely divided, hostile city, holding nothing but ink on parchment.
That's terrifying. Did the letter work?
That's the question. Did the rebels hear about the cosmos, the phoenix, and the call to love and weep and step down? Or did they tear the document to shreds and chase those 3 messengers out of the city?
What happened?
The text abruptly ends, leaving us entirely in the dark about the immediate fate of those ancient postmen, and whether words alone were truly enough to extinguish a mutiny.
Okay, let's jump right into this explainer, where we're going to unpack the urgent, final letter of St. Ignatius of Antioch. He wrote this to the Ephesians while facing his own impending execution. Just imagine that for a second, knowing your days are literally numbered, that a violent end is waiting for you in Rome, and yet, your final act is writing these profound, theologically rich letters of encouragement to the communities you're leaving behind. That's exactly what we're looking at today. It's an incredible piece of early 2nd century history, and it gives us a front-row seat into the mind of a condemned man whose faith just completely overrides his fear.
The text we're analyzing today is anchored by some fantastic translations provided by the Orthodox Christian Fellowship. Having this curated source material is so crucial, you know? It gives us a pristine window into this ancient masterpiece. Because when you're dealing with texts that are nearly 2,000 years old, the translation is everything. It lets us actually feel the passion, the brilliant metaphors, and the urgent pleas of a man actively being transported to his death. And we really have to start with the sheer life or death reality of this text. Ignatius writes that he is, quote, trusting through your prayers to be permitted to fight with beasts at Rome. He's not writing this from some comfortable, quiet study. He is chained up, bound from Syria, and making a brutal trek to the Colosseum. But what's really mind-blowing here is his perspective. He doesn't ask for prayers for a pardon or an escape, no way. He views his upcoming martyrdom as the ultimate way to become a true disciple of Jesus. That mindset completely sets the tone for everything else he's about to say.
So let's look at his first major theme. Section 1, the Symphony of Unity.
Now, what's really interesting is that despite his own terrifying situation, his primary concern actually isn't his own life. It's the perfect harmony of the Ephesian church and their bishop, Onesimus. He uses this incredibly beautiful metaphor, explaining that the community leaders, the presbytery, should be tuned to their bishop exactly like strings on a harp. And why a harp? Well, because when strings are perfectly tensioned and aligned, they don't produce a bunch of chaotic noise, right? They produce a single, beautiful chord. He's saying that through this harmonious love, Jesus Christ is quite literally sung.
And this brilliantly illustrates what we might call a hierarchy of harmony. Ignatius takes this idea of local unity and elevates it to a completely cosmic level. He compares the tight-knit unity of the church and its bishop directly to the inseparable divine bond between Jesus Christ and the Father. He's arguing that how a community treats each other and how they respect their leadership isn't just about good administrative order, it's a profound reflection of the very nature of God. To break that unity is basically to step completely outside the divine harmony.
Let's jump over to chapter 9, where he shifts from musical metaphors to visualizing the community as a massive construction site. He sees the Ephesians as stones being prepared for a temple. But how do you hoist those heavy stones up? He says the cross of Jesus Christ is literally the hoisting engine, and the rope pulling you up, that's the Holy Spirit. Meanwhile, your faith and love are the actual path leading up to God. It's such a vivid, mechanical description of spiritual ascent. It makes the theology feel so tangible, showing how every single believer is an essential piece of this massive divine architecture.
But, as you might guess, this beautiful, carefully constructed temple is under severe threat. Which brings us to Section 2, Beware the Ravening Dogs.
Ignatius desperately warns the Ephesians to flee from false teachers. He describes them as carrying the name of Christ in wicked guile, acting out things unworthy of God, which forces us to ask, who exactly are these ravening dogs? Well, Ignatius tells us they bite secretly, and they're dangerous precisely because they don't look like obvious enemies. They use the Christian name to infiltrate and sow false doctrine. He actually tells the Ephesians to avoid them like wild beasts, which is a pretty chilling comparison coming from a man who's literally on his way to face actual wild beasts in the arena.
The crucial point here is the stakes. Why is he so intensely worried about this? He plainly states that those who corrupt the faith with wicked doctrine, what he calls the bad odor of the prince of this world, will face everlasting fire. For Ignatius, this isn't just a polite difference of opinion. It is literally a matter of spiritual life and death. You're either moving toward true life in Jesus Christ through unity, or you're being led away from it. But to encourage the Ephesians, he praises them by drawing a really stark contrast between the carnal and the spiritual. Because they've rejected these false teachers and are devoted to God, he says their very nature is transformed. A carnal person cannot do spiritual things. But for the spiritual person, for the Ephesians who do all things in Jesus Christ, even their ordinary, everyday flesh and blood actions become deeply spiritual. What you do in your physical life carries massive spiritual weight when anchored in the right faith.
To ground all these practical warnings, Ignatius then pivots to the deep cosmic theology that forms the absolute bedrock of their faith. Let's explore Section 3, Three Mysteries and a Star. In Chapter 19, he outlines three profound, celebrated mysteries: Mary's virginity, the birth of Jesus, and his death, and it's fascinating how he describes them. He says these three earth-shattering events were completely hidden from the prince of this world. They were wrought in the silence of God. The devil literally had no idea what God was actually doing. The ultimate plan for human salvation was orchestrated entirely under the radar.
But obviously, these mysteries didn't stay hidden forever, right? How were they finally revealed? Well, Ignatius describes a blinding cosmic event. He writes, "A star shone forth in heaven above all the other stars, the light of which was inexpressible, while its novelty struck men with astonishment." He paints a picture of this spectacular star completely disrupting the heavens. It was the exact moment God's silent plan violently broke into human history.
And this wasn't just some neat celestial anomaly. Its appearance caused a massive cosmic disruption. Ignatius writes that because of this, every kind of magic was destroyed, and the old kingdom was abolished. But most importantly, it signaled that God was manifesting himself in human form for one ultimate purpose: the abolition of death itself. That is the monumental truth Ignatius is willing to die for, the absolute knowledge that death has already been defeated.
So, knowing all these massive cosmic truths, how does a condemned man instruct his followers to actually live out their days? Let's look at our final section. Actions speak louder than words.
He demands that the Ephesians instruct unbelievers, and even those openly hostile to them, through their actions. When faced with wrath, be meek. When faced with boasting, be humble. When faced with blasphemies, return prayers. He's telling them to manifest gentleness rather than imitating the cruelty of their opponents. It is a radical, radical call to absorb the hostility of the world and return it with the unwavering love of Christ.
To survive these trials, he urges them to meet together frequently to break one and the same bread. He famously defines this act of communion as the ultimate medicine of immortality. It's an incredible phrase. It is the absolute antidote to prevent spiritual death, ensuring they live forever in Jesus Christ. The community gathered around the altar is quite literally their lifeline.
We're going to wrap up this explainer with an incredibly powerful thought from chapter 15. Ignatius writes, "It is better for a man to be silent and be a Christian than to talk and not to be one." He's emphasizing that true faith is validated entirely by the fruit of our conduct, not the volume of our profession. There's no demand for mere lip service anymore. Your life, your daily actions, that has to be the absolute proof of your words. So, as you reflect on the final words of a man walking purposefully toward his own execution, a man who viewed his martyrdom not as a tragedy but as the completion of his faith, ask yourself, do your actions align so perfectly with your stated beliefs that your faith is recognizable even in your silence? It's a profound challenge. How do we maintain our own unity and ensure our actions truly speak louder than our words? I'll leave you with that to think about. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.